Hello there, Mad Mike here, and welcome back to the channel. And today we have the unfortunate news that actor Peter Fonda has died at the age of 79 due to complications from lung cancer. Um, Peter Fonda, I would be lying if I said he was one of my favorite actors. I know a lot of the major stuff he was in. I like a lot of the major stuff he was in, but I can't say I followed him as closely as I've followed other actors. But he was in very pivotal movies for the film industry, and he has some of the films that he was in, or at least some of them, were very changing for the film industry and very telling. Now, I'm going to really only go over two of his major films here. One of them, of course, is Easy Rider, and the other one is Yuli's Gold. Now, to kind of put it in perspective, Easy Rider was a film that really it was very, very telling of the times in America, and it paved the way for a lot of films after it, because you got to remember in the 50s and through a lot of the 60s, a lot of the films were still very wholesome. They were, it was kind of like, there wasn't a lot of really hard edge stuff going on. Hollywood wasn't really into putting out stuff that was very close to what reality was. They were more of the idea that you know it should be displaced from reality to a certain extent, and kind of be in this wholesome type of dream world almost, where people acted a certain way. And Easy Rider was a film that really broke the mold. Now Peter Fonda plays Wyatt, also known as Captain America, and of course Dennis Hopper plays Billy, known as Marlboro Man, and Jack Nicholson plays George, who's an ACLU lawyer they meet in a drunk tank. Now, the main idea of Easy Rider is that Billy and Wyatt have smuggled cocaine up from Mexico, and uh, they've smuggled cocaine up from Mexico, and they wind up selling it, and then going to bring the money to Mardi Gras in New Orleans. So it's really about their bike ride kind of across the country. They meet, various people, but it's the idea of this kind of new generation. They delve into a lot of the stuff with, the hippie generation. Because again, 1969 was Woodstock, even though this came out actually before, I believe, before Woodstock actually happened. But it's the idea of it. Um, where they meet all these hippies. They take LSD at one point. There was a lot of stuff going on there that was very reflective of reality, and there wasn't a shit ton of drug use in films up to that point. 60s was the same decade, I believe, that we got Reefer Madness. But they wind up. The idea is that they met a lot of very nice people. They met a lot of very normal people, especially early on in the story. And well, I should say normal, but they've been a lot of very nice people early on in the story. But the idea is that there were people out there was a counterculture. It's kind of the idea of, there's the hippie culture, and then there's the kind of the old guard, the counterculture that doesn't really like them. And the idea was that they were the outsiders in a lot of ways. And there's the more to the point, they're kind of supposed to represent these newer, younger Americans that were coming up at the time. And the antagonists really of the film are just kind of the older, more embedded generation, the old townies kind of people. And the other message of it is the violence, and the idea that you can have violence done against you just because people don't like you. And it's becomes more evident throughout the film as everything goes forward, especially at the end, where it's just a shocking ending. Where Billy and Wyatt are just gunned down on the road, and and then it just ends. And it's kind of like the idea that it can end at any time. You know, the irony of it. I'm talking about Peter Fonda's death, but the idea is that it can be ended at any time. But the thing about Easy Rider is that I think that there were if you didn't have Easy Rider, you wouldn't have had a lot of deep films in the 70s and going forward into the 80s and stuff like that, you wouldn't have had a lot of those things. That film was very much on the cutting edge of what storytelling was at the time. And it's a great role for Peter Fonda. Peter Fonda plays a amazing part as Wyatt slash Captain America, and he does a great job at playing kind of this really down to earth. Again, he's kind of the hippie type. He's not quite as hippie as Dennis Hopper, but he's pretty damn close. And he just wants to live and let live, and he just wants to go around and just treat people right. He's not out to hurt anybody, and it shows them. There's just actually this kind of great scene near the end of it where they bring these two prostitutes out to this place in the French Quarter of New Orleans, and they do acid, and they wind up. It's an interesting part in the film because it feels almost like a student film at that point. It's very weird. And there's a lot of color changes and stuff like that. I feel like that scene was probably written by Dennis Hopper, but you can't underplay what Peter Fonda meant to the film industry after that movie. And it's kind of sad that he didn't get a lot more very large roles in films after that. But one of the ones that really stuck out was Yuli's Gold, and that was when he was older. It was 1997, and he's playing a grandfather at that point, which makes sense. I think he would have been like 50 something around then, or 60 something. But the Yuli's Gold is a completely different animal than Easy Rider. Yuli's Gold feels like Captain America lived through Easy Rider and just got married, retired, had kids and stuff. But Yuli's Gold is much more. It's based around family. It's the idea. It's a very condensed movie in a lot of ways. Where Yuli is this character who he's been widowed. He has two kids that have bad drug problems, and he has two granddaughters as well who are relatively young. One's a teenager, and one I think is around 9 or 10. And he he's kind of forced into this role as a father again after he essentially failed the first time. And he's just, he has this house out kind of out there, rural, and he keeps bees and stuff like that, and that's kind of his passion and his hobby, and that's also kind of his business almost now that he's semi-retired. His wife has been dead for a number of years, and he really hasn't made any effort to date or try to rekindle any kind of romantic relationships. He has a nurse that lives next door that kind of has a thing for him, but he hasn't really pursued it because he's still kind of basically it's almost like a man who's in depression. And that's a lot of what it feels like. And his son is in jail after a botched bank robbery, and his daughter is left a while back, and they really don't know where she is. And eventually she turns up, and there's a lot of stuff involving drug addiction. Again, this shows kind of the Easy Rider kind of shows the 60s kind of freewheeling. Oh, let's do some LSD and stuff like that. It doesn't 100% show the negative effects of hardcore drug addiction. This film is the opposite side of the coin, where it shows that the daughter is she's basically in a halfway house, and she basically he goes to get her, and it's kind of the idea of rekindling his relationship with his daughter, as well as there are people looking for the bank robbery money that his son stole that is apparently buried on his property, and that's really, even though that's the main plot line, it doesn't feel like it. And that's deliberate. That's for a reason. Because when the main idea of the film is kind of the idea that you know family can come back together, family can help each other, and the idea of family, that's kind of the idea of the film. And it centers around Yuli because his family is so broken. His wife is gone, his kids are drug addicts, his grandchildren have been abandoned, and now he's kind of forced to take care of them. And initially he's very hesitant about it, until he comes around to it, and he gets he falls back into his role as a more of a father rather than a grandfather. And you know Peter Fonda does a very good job at that, and I don't know if necessarily that was because that was around the point where he was in his life when this was being filmed, but it is good to note that he really does a great job in this movie at portraying kind of that concerning fatherly figure who's trying to, reunite his family. And at the end of the film, he is in a much better place. He's finally pursuing a relationship with the nurse, and his daughter is back and she's clean, at least for the time being. And they're helping out with the bee business, and the granddaughters have warmed up to him by that point, and the son's about to get out of jail. So there's a lot that really happens throughout the film, and you get to see his development as a character. And again, Peter Fonda does a great job at portraying this character who's basically forced back into this role, and ultimately it is beneficial to him because it brings him out of this depression that he's been in for many, many years, or at least what appears to be many, many years. But that's Peter Fonda. He did a very good job at kind of playing these very realistic type of people. Now he did have a lot of bit roles over the years. I remember, I think he was in the first Ghost Rider film as the devil or something, and he was in a few Roger Corman productions early in his career. People know Roger Corman as the B movie king, but most people will remember him from those two films, and I think that's what you should take away from it, is that those two films were great acting jobs by him. And again, it's kind of sad that he didn't get more really big roles in films over the years. He did get some, but nothing that really had the impact that Ulee's Gold and Easy Rider did. But that's just my little breakdown of Peter Fonda and some of his major roles. Um, you know, if you're a fan or anything, put your favorite Peter Fonda film in the comments below. Mine is Easy Rider, and hit the bell for notifications. Hit the like button, subscribe, and remember, I live my life free of compromise. Do you?